Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And we got a good episode coming your way, navigating power struggles with your partner.
As odd as it may sound, I really enjoy talking about power struggles, and we have experienced a few ourselves. Definitely, I've had to learn some of the skills we're going to be talking about today because I can at times want it my way, right? So I really think this is going to be relevant for couples because we want to be in a harmonious partnership, not trapped in a power struggle. So I also want to note that I might sound like I have a little bit of a radio voice. My throat's just doing a funny thing today, so just wanted to put that out there. But let's define an easy way to think about a power struggle.
Wait a second. I want to define it.
I said I was going to do it.
You always do it. You literally always do the intro.
Are you kidding me? Like, no.
I'm going to do it this time. So
This is ridiculous.
So no, this isn't a mess up, right? This is a power struggle, or it could be. So we'll see how that came across. But we do want to note that a power struggle for us and how we've seen it in coaching sessions, as we have seen it more frequent in the past couple of weeks, hence why we want to do an episode on it. But there is a difference, right? Now, I'll actually let you go further with the definition. But there's a difference when you just disagree on something. And then there's certain dynamics and certain contributing factors at play that turn it more into a power struggle. And I think the two of us saw this specifically on 2 or 3 sessions this past week, where we're like, okay, that's actually more of a power struggle, not just sort of a disagreement.
Exactly. It's not like, oh, you're just disagreeing on parenting. Like, we notice you're actually fighting for power right now. And we'll really get into the details of that. But a simple definition is a situation where couples compete for influence. Now, really think about that. And I know that in marriage, you might not think of the word influence very often. However, that's really one of the fundamental things to understand about really any relationship, a business relationship, parent to child, romantic partner, is that relationships in a sense are like, navigating influence. And when people get caught in these ideas of power, they think power over someone else. But that's not the way that you want to have power in your romantic partnership, let alone maybe any relationships. It's not power over each other. It's having this harmonious ability to influence each other in good ways.
You could also probably insert the term control. If I was to add a little extra to it, I would say it's when there's a real rigidity on both partners to not change their stance or their opinion or their preference to a decision or a particular relationship topic.
I would say we can be rigid sometimes. There's definitely I was just thinking about it as we were preparing, and I feel one of the secrets to you and I, because we have a lot of similarities, but we also have differences in our personality. Like, there's certain things that you would call yourself, quote unquote, like OCD about, right? Like, you would call yourself that. And I've had to learn which ones do I really kind of press because it's important to me versus which ones do I let you just have your way. And we'll talk about that too.
The personality trait is high on conscientiousness, which can be the organization. It can be sort of cleanliness. But funny enough, I don't necessarily identify myself with the cleanliness aspect as much as I do with organization and order. I think an outcome of that is that it's cleaner. But I saw this early in our relationship. I really wasn't one to, I was going to hold this back, but like clean the toilets. Like, it's not my favorite thing. It's not that I'm like cleaning every surface. It's just that I'll take my shoes off. My shoes are always clean. I'm not even bringing dirt in. Everything has its place. Everything goes in a very organized, systemized manner. I don't like let things get disorganized or make a mess. And so again, the outcome of that level of structure and organization is that things aren't very messy, or they stay relatively clean. It's going to be dusty. That's where I see
but organized.
The cleanliness. Like, I'm not dusting things. You vacuum more than I do, or have the desire for it to be vacuumed, where I think you can see where I'm going with that.
Well, what's one more place I see it, and then we'll continue on with some definitions here, but I noticed that you really think about the order in which you'd want to do things. Like if we're going to go for a day out and we're like, okay, yeah, let's do a combination of going to the park with Sky, and then we've got a few errands to run, and then there's the birthday party. You will kind of have this defined way you think it should be, the order, and you'll express it. And then sometimes I'll sense a power struggle because I'll be like, but wait, no, I think I'd like to have lunch first, then do this. And I sense the tension, right? And we've talked about that in other episodes, that tension doesn't always have to escalate and become something. If you can sense it and go, okay, hold on, right here, we're in a bit of a power struggle. He really wants it his way.
Well, if I could, I do want to make a differentiation between there's tension because there's a differing opinion on how we should complete activities or in the timing of it, or a little bit of like unmet expectation, which is kind of like, from my point of view, you're a little late in this game of planning and now you're wanting to change. So me being flexible with how I plan things out, you can have tension and disagree, which is not like it happens often for us, but in these moments that we're discussing here on this podcast is more how it shows up. Yeah. And I do want to say that to me is different than a power struggle. We both have a way we want something to go, and there's a little bit of tension, and now it requires, which we're going to get into later, some skills of communication and negotiation, and sometimes a little bit of like conflict resolution. But to me, I still think that's different than this power struggle.
Yeah, I could see that. Now, I want to really paint the picture of something, because imagine that there's this line, this scale, where you can be far on the left of independence, right? That's where, as human beings, we have, some psychologists would argue, like an innate desire, or like the ego mind wants, it's independence. I want to know I am a separate being, separate self. And then on the other side is codependence, which is where you could actually think some couples are in the beginning of a relationship. When it's exciting and you're like spending the night at each other's houses, or you're dating, you're texting all day long. Like you're working, but you're texting a ton. You talk longer on the phone. You're making decisions. Like it feels like you're very, very close quickly in a relationship of, maybe not for everyone, but that's just a generalization to make. And so some couples can find themselves for a period of time actually more codependent. Now, there are some people who believe there are stages of a relationship where, it can be somewhat linear, but you can bounce back and forth. And where they say you can get stuck is in really trying to find this harmony of interdependence, right? So think on the far left would be independence, far right, codependence. We're wanting to navigate not exactly this middle ground, because I don't think that's how life always works, is that you find this perfect middle.
Or based on personalities of the two people.
Exactly. But you find an interdependence, which, just to give a simple way of thinking about that, is that there's a healthy balance, a harmony between I am myself and I have my own perspectives, interests, beliefs, and there's a we, there's us, there's a team, that we are actually creating this third entity called our relationship. And it takes some negotiation for sure that we're going to be talking about. But interdependence allows you to have harmony, where you can be two separate individuals, but your relationship also can thrive.
Yeah, it's been also labeled as that dimension of togetherness and separateness that still allows for the physical and emotional needs of the other to be met. Now, I wanted to add a little something. We covered a episode a little while ago on the triangle of love theory, which goes to the stages that you're talking about. So I want to give some color based on that theory. You go through stages, which is really about increasing your passion, your closeness, and your commitment. And then so based on those three dimensions, you kind of create a different relationship. Now, I'm not going to go into those. You can go listen to the previous episode. But I think when you're in that early stage, what you're doing is really seeing that you can cultivate those increases in passion, in closeness. And by doing those two, you see if you then can build that commitment. And that's like, oh, we're going to get married. We're going to live our life together. And so I think you need that sort of codependence type of stage to focus in on those three dimensions. once those are established, which is like a secure love or a complete love, then you're able to start or should focus on this balance of interdependence versus codependence.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of create some, almost separateness. So I wanted to start to dive further into where I see and where we see the power struggle come from as far as contributing factors.
Yeah. And I want to just really quickly preface this idea, like the first point of this being about, just to spoil it, flexibility, which you have to realize that relationships are not this like linear process. You're going to, for example, let's say you were married for several years, then you have a child. You're actually, in a sense, going to become a little bit more codependent during that early stage with an infant because you have to, or you should, because you rely so much on each other to sleep, to eat, to work, to navigate everything. So you actually
to take care of this human being.
Exactly. So you're going to oscillate in a sense of like, okay, we're a little bit more codependent right now. Okay, maybe we got a little too independent. And so with that, one of the first contributing factors is that you aren't finding that flexibility within yourself. You aren't showing up as flexible enough, which is an important trait to have because, again, it's not linear. It's not how I am today and how I show up is going to be the same for in a few months. No, our circumstances might be different in a few months or just the season that we're in. And so we have to realize that we have our personality traits. We have these ways of operating, these habits, but I need to be flexible and adjust myself. Not, I'm saying become a person that you aren't, like become a fake person, but just be flexible for what is needed today. And so that is one of the big contributing factors as I see that people will get rigid. They will say like, no, this is who I am. This is how I do things. This is how I show up. No, this is my routine. It's like, that's not going to work as your circumstances evolve.
That's really a great point. That was a bonus one that we didn't even have noted down.
Oh, it was in my head.
You just went for it. So that's really great. If I was to add a title or a summary to this, I would say it's about your lack of willingness to adopt for the value needed for that season. And so, to your point, it's like what I value is my independence. Well, we have a child. So it's like...
You can only get so much.
What is your real value? Is your value towards being the couple you need to in those early stages for the value of bringing this child into the world in the most proper way? And I think, to your point, we have to adjust our individual value structure or value system based on how life is presenting itself. So I think, to your point, a power struggle, even internally, is going to come from me not being open to adjusting my own value structure for what's actually needed, for like what's best for our family, holding on to one that's just for myself.
Yeah.
So that was a great one. Wasn't even planning on that one. So let's call that number one. Number two and number three are going to be tied together. And it's primarily that your need isn't being met. But in the first case, it's that your need's not being met because your assertiveness is too low. So if I was to paint this picture, it's that your partner is like asking things of you or sharing their opinion, their ideas, and you don't really want to say yes to that.
Or you don't
like
speak
you have
up.
a different idea, you would like to express something else, but the fact is you just comply. So you're complying with what your partner is asking for or sharing out of not wanting to have tension or to cause a fight. And we know that in the long term, that's just even the medium, even like the short plus to medium to long term, that's just not a good strategy. So you go along with what they want to do, but you're going to get to the place where you end up like bursting out and taking this hard, rigid stance on a topic that literally could be anything. It could be anything from keeping to a nap time or the dishes or where to eat or what thing to spend on this month. Like it could be anything. That's why this gets complex, because your partner is all of a sudden like, yo, like where is this hard, rigid, almost aggressive stance coming from? And it's not on the topic specifically. It's just literally from your lack of assertiveness over time. then you feel, well, my voice isn't being heard. You aren't considering me. This is all your internal dialogue. But really, it's because your assertiveness has been so low. It's like really on you, but then you choose to randomly take a stance on something. And it's just like, I'm not going to be controlled. I'm not going to be told what to do. You don't listen to me. And then this is just the time I'm choosing to make this stance. And that, to me, is a real power struggle.
There's an interesting thing I've noticed about that assertiveness piece is, so even a couple recently that we were talking to, it was the first time we met with them, and they both work full time. They have very high stress jobs. They also have a baby under 9 months. And what they were feeling at times was they'd be like there with the baby by the crib, and they'd feel the power struggle. And they might say, no, Freemans, I'm being assertive. I'm expressing, for example, in one situation, they were saying, no, I'm expressing that I need to get some work done. So we need to get the baby down for the nap. And the other person's like, well, I need rest. Like, I haven't slept in a few hours. However, assertiveness isn't just, here's the simple thing I need or to get done. I think what can be missing a lot of times is context for people. So for example, if I were to just say to Aaron, like, hey, I need to get some work done. Like, I've got to go. You got to get the baby down for the nap. But then he also has his competing need. Rather than me saying, hey, you know what? I know it's been a long morning. I'm feeling really stressed because of this deadline that I have. And I feel like if I just concentrated for an hour, I'd be able to switch gears and take over with the baby. And so I just wanted to offer that as like being assertive. Add a little sprinkle of context for your partner, more about your experience, more about how you're feeling, more about what that would make available to you, because providing context for the other person helps them see more of the big picture rather than just simply like, blah, here's the thing I need, and this is why you need to do it. Then it can just be, you're kind of competing at the surface level rather than, okay, we need to negotiate a little bit right now based on the underlying stressors that each of us are facing.
So you added in the third point, which would be you have high assertiveness and not just being demanding. You've been expressing what you need, want, preferences, ideas, but then there's a low, very low openness to almost rigidity on the side of the other partner to meet that. So in either case, the power struggle is coming from an unmet need, but first it's that you yourself have very low assertiveness. And then secondly, you've been highly assertive, but there is a real, again, rigidity on the side of your partner to flex, to compromise, to negotiate, to even hear you out. So those being the two, and to your point, it's like, yeah, being a little more assertive, but then also providing context, which we're kind of getting to already. Some of the skills being, you could share what the priority level is to you. And initially where you felt there was a power struggle, maybe what you were missing is how important is that thing to each of you. And a simple way to do this is to give it a score from 0 to 10, 10 being the highest priority for you right now.
Well, I have a quick personal example, actually. So we're getting ready to move into our new home, and we are planning different contractors to come and different things to get added and done. And there's a certain preference you have. I won't give away, it's kind of a personal detail, but there's something you really, really wanted to have done a certain way. And it kind of takes more paperwork. It's a little more frustrating. It's a little more cumbersome. And if I weren't conscientious about these traits of flexibility and knowing that we need to sometimes give each other a win, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, I could really fight you on it and be like, this doesn't make sense. It's not that important. Like, it's actually adds more work for me to have to do this and that. But you expressed, to your point a moment ago, that it's really important to you. Like 10 out of 10 importance. So even though it's a little more cumbersome, a little more work, it doesn't make sense to me completely, I'm going to do it because you said it's 10 out of 10 importance. And that's partnership sometimes, is doing it because it's 10 out of 10 important to them, or even above 8 out of 10, you could say.
Yeah, so you can go with who scores higher. You just have to be honest, with your self-assessment.
Not everything can be a 10 out of 10 important.
So the next point here on the contributing factors to power struggles, I would say, is a low love account. You've heard us talk about that enough times now. And I would say that it's the love account not being expressed, meaning, hey, I think last week my love account was a little bit lower. Maybe I'm at a 3 or 4, and what I really need is, more deposits. So When you don't do that, you just let the love account start to dwindle more and more. That kind of feeling lingers. And then all of a sudden now small things start to build up. You feel as if comments that your partner makes are more critical, more personal, more like attacks. And then similar to previous, it's that you just start to take a stance. And in this case, not because your needs not getting met, but it's because I'm just not going to give any ground here because you haven't been showing me very much love at all. And so, no, I'm not going to do that.
So it's like if you ask for something from me, for example, but I'm not having my needs met, my love account is so low, then I could kind of fight you on it. Because it's like, well, you're not meeting me halfway.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not trying to put effort into what I need.
Well, so you're asking for more and you think to yourself, well, what have you been doing for me? That kind of mentality.
Yeah, that could be with a couple who is disagreeing about, one of them wanting to do something with their friends or focus more on their hobby. And the other person's like, but you're not even prioritizing me and our relationship. And so it can be more of a, no, I'm at a 2 out of 10 love account. Why would I give you even more free time when I'm not even having my need for love, connection, affection met? So love account absolutely can be a part of it.
So would say that overall, you put this all together, you have to find ways to let each other lead and or get a win, from time to time. And it's not stepping on each other's toes or feeling like you're the expert on one particular thing and they just have to get out of the way, bulldoze them. This is my area. And just something else to consider, right? If you are frequently shutting down your partner's ideas and their opinions, even if they're not being assertive with you about them, I just think to yourself, okay, I listen to this podcast and my partner needs to be more assertive about their needs. That's why we have power struggles. Well, okay, but that's going to be a path your partner's going to be on, is being more assertive. So in the interim, just realize that if you are seemingly shutting down your partner the majority of the time, really don't expect them to be showing up with a joyful attitude, being more present, putting in a lot of effort to make these deposits into your love account and spend time with you. They will just start to push back against you and your decisions that will further create these power struggles.
That's interesting. Yeah, because it's like if I'm not letting you have a win, it almost is like discouraging. It's not motivating to you in a sense, which motivation is important for any human behavior.
I think you feel suppressed, you feel constrained, you feel like the relationship doesn't support you flourishing. It's like just limiting you.
Yeah. I want to say a little bit more about that point you said at the beginning about finding ways to let each other lead and or win. Because this really is something subtle we do in our lives. Subtle, maybe not. Maybe it's a bigger deal than we even talk about it. But we find as many ways as possible to have clear roles and things that we each own. Okay? Because if we're stepping on each other's toes, if it's like, okay, we have to make this complete decision, everything is together. Always talking about finances, completely 50-50. Always talking about parenting things, 50-50. Always talking about, these family matters. And of course, you need to come to agreements. So that's actually one of the next big things we talk about is that with the big categories, the big topics in your relationship, you do need to communicate and come up with clear agreements. That is one of the best communication and conflict prevention techniques, is to have clear agreements, which then you have to follow through. You have to have integrity. Now, if we have clear agreements, so using parenting for an example, we know how we want to handle big emotions. We know how we want to help shape her behavior and her learning. Now we have the agreements. When it comes to the time of implementing the techniques, we are not both trying to intervene at the same time. We are letting one of us lead within the bounds of our agreement, right? And so we aren't like, okay, both trying to tackle the situation and competing for the influence in that moment. Same thing with finances. We have clear agreements. We honor them. So if we're ever coming up to some kind of a financial decision or spending, we are not like fighting for that power or having to take a stand on every financial decision because we have the clear agreements. It is one of the best ways, you guys, that you can reduce, if not eliminate, so many power struggles is by just having clear agreements. Let's just be on the same page about as many things as possible and then operate within those agreements.
Yeah, you could say that overall you have aligned your core values or your value system, and then you trickle that down into what that looks like in each category: money, parenting, homework, roles, boundaries, all the things you had just mentioned. And you can even then assign ownership for each of those. And it's like, well, we both know and trust how the other one's going to operate inside of our value structure. And so, like for me and for us, I handle all of the money things. We're buying a new house. I've done all the work for getting the loan and everything that goes with that. Credit cards, money incoming, out, like I just do it all. But you trust that I'm then staying within the agreements. I'm not just randomly buying expensive things for my own benefit, let's say, for example. And so
I'm also not stepping on your toes about it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not like being like, why are you doing it that way? Why are you doing it? No, this is the order you should be doing it. So that's a really good point. And if you are going to designate these certain roles in different areas of your life, you can't then exert your opinion on every little thing or even big things. Otherwise, it will feel constantly like, can't I own my area?
Yeah. There's a level of being able to feel, well, that inner dependence or maybe even independence within the confines of your value system and your agreements. Right? And there's a lot of freedom there.
Yeah.
It's like, I have communicated overall, and then I just handle the money stuff.
Yeah.
And again, you're not intervening. And probably a quick example I could think of with you is social media. I think a while back, I used to try to put my suggestions and influence, and you're like, I've spent a magnitude order more time focusing on our social media. And so you'll ask me from time to time, but if I try to correct, I've already learned it. So I try to correct something on a social media post or video or something, you're like, it creates a power struggle,
Yes.
right? And again, I'm understanding it as I'm saying it now, because I guess without explicit expression, that is your area. You put so much time and effort into it. You've really owned it. You do an amazing job. So for me to come in and start to make these little critiques or questions or try to alter it, it's like I'm stepping kind of outside of our roles, in this case, more of like a implicit agreement.
So in there's just like a quick thread I want to make sure is highlighted. So let's say you are coming up with clear agreements for these big ones, which you should, and then you have created as many defined roles as you can. Of course, you can't do everything separate. Some things have to be done together. But can you rely on each other? And this is another thing that could cause a power struggle, is you have the agreements, you have the roles, but you're not stepping up into your role, which then is going to cause this power struggle of, here, I'm supposed to be relying on you to be owning, X topic, but yet you aren't following through. There's going to be a power struggle, and you'll have to own up to that. So I just want to put that as a thread of, if you're going to take on these roles, if you're going to say, I own this, then you need to be reliable. Otherwise, it's going to cause a follow-up power struggle of, why aren't you doing it? And, but I am, let me own it. It's like,
one last thing, the way I see this and the way that I said it on a session last week, a lot of these things are just the task management of life and being married and having a shared life together. And just get these handled. Like, these are too small of things to be causing power struggles. I won't reiterate everything you just said, but do those things so those can just be done. And they're not road bumps. They're not road blocks to focusing on the bigger vision, which is going to need to be adjusted at times. Like, what are we in the relationship for? What do we want to kind of be as a partnership out in the world? What do we want to create?
What kind of
How do we want to
family?
guide our family? What kind of community do we want to cultivate?
Experiences. What experience do we want to have in life?
Experiences.
Where do we want to go? What is life really about? And if you're focused exactly right, like, you and I never, ever argue about household things. And I think that is something for us to celebrate, because that's a big source of conflict.
Make suggestions about the
we
coffee
might,
cup being poured out.
Yes, we make little requests from time to time, but we don't argue about it because we have clear agreements, we own our roles, and we get it done.
So the part I wanted to just make clear, maybe there was a time in which someone listening could have thought, they just kind of do all these things on their own. Well, no, it's like we do the things that are just simple and clear agreements and integrity and follow to like get those done so that the rest of our life can really be about higher level things, connecting, our vision, our values, our community. It's like, that's where you want to be connecting on. Those are like bigger pieces. We talk to so many couples that are just, to me, like digging in the dirt and like having power struggles about stuff that you really want to be beyond at this point.
Yeah. So we know we've covered a lot of different elements here. You want to make sure that you are noticing when power struggles are occurring and you are using the communication techniques that we talked about in the episode. For example, the different nuances of assertiveness, being flexible, the art of being able to negotiate and come up with agreements, and then honoring those agreements. And you've got to operate as a team. And remember, you want a harmonious partnership. You want to be able to enjoy life, and this means just getting certain management things handled. And if these are some of the topics that you want guidance in navigating, unfortunately, we have a very long wait list for private sessions, but that's why we have all of our other resources. Like if you have our family meeting guide, which get it if you don't have it, this is going to have you address many of these conversations around values, priorities, agreements, goals. What are we focused on? So the family meeting guide is just an incredible tool that you can get on its own. You can also get it if you join the 30-day couples challenge. We have all of our guides, navigating conflict, how to make sure it stays constructive. So you guys utilize our resources because that's what allows you to do, is to cultivate these skills and be able to get out of any of those patterns and cycles that are so frustrating and derail you from having a fulfilling, connected partnership. So go to meetthefreemans.com/links to use the resources. And if you don't have any of them, get all of the ones that resonate with you because they are very targeted, very actionable, and they get you having these conversations in a productive way. So go to meetthefreemans.com/links. And we're so grateful that you're listening. If you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can hear past episodes and future episodes. And if you've been listening for a little while, it helps us so much if you give us a rating. Hopefully you feel we're worthy of a 5-star rating. That helps us so much. But we're grateful you're here, and we will talk to you on the next episode.